Thinking Through Zombies. I'm Dr. Zlomyslich, and for the next 14 weeks, we will learn how to analyze what zombies can tell us about the human condition. In these video supplements, we will use the tools of philosophical analysis to look at the ways in which zombies have been understood historically and culturally. Ours is not the epoch of the Anthropocene or the epoch of the human. It is the epoch of the Zombie-pocene, monstrous indeed and overwhelming in its constant crisis since the dawn of recorded memory. The word zombie is something my teacher Jacques Derrida would call an aporia. It is paradoxical and contains many different meanings. On the one hand, the word zombie may be defined as what happens to those persons who are enslaved by monstrous human beings and forced to work until their death. With films like White Zombie, we see the zombie as a slave, deprived of human agency and doomed to a life of labor and death. In this first sense, we become zombies when we are reduced to mere machines who toil for a so-called master who has no regard for our lives and livelihood. In this first historical sense, a zombie is someone who is enslaved, dehumanized, controlled, manipulated, and abused. Their humanity has been taken away from them. The history of our species is full of such examples where our uniqueness, inherent worth, and dignity has been taken away, not by fictitious monsters, but by human beings acting monstrous. This first type of zombie is not a monster at all, but a victim who was enslaved and controlled. On the other hand, the second meaning of zombie are those monsters who look like human beings but act in an inhuman manner. The word I would use for this second type of zombie, following George Romero, is ghoul. Again, our history is full of examples of zombie ghouls who did evil with malicious intent, with mindless abandon, with rational calculation. These ghouls have done great and irreparable harm to persons and have made the earth a graveyard of needless suffering. The ghoul has lost all sense of humanity. They are evil embodied in human form. The ghoul needs to be confronted before they destroy humanity. Ghouls are most often found in places of power. They infiltrate institutions in order to wreak the most havoc on human persons. From current presidents and politicians, we have seen the everyday horrors that cross our landscape. The zombie ghoul is a living corpse that drowns out any vestige of humanity. Here, the closest story from fairy tales would be the cannibalistic ogre. Zombies and ghouls are not something new. They have been with us since the evolution of our species. For me, the zombie genre does not reveal an aesthetics of catastrophe, but an ethics of catastrophe. Being a zombie means being reduced to a non-human state by humans who act monstrous. So it is not a question of zombie cinema, but a question of why has the zombification of everyday life followed our rise in consciousness? I am therefore not interested in the horror genre or how it interfaces with its audiences. Horror as a genre presents a fictionalized account of suffering that ignores the real peril of real human beings. And yet, if we are to believe Michonne from The Walking Dead, there are slivers of light and hope and goodness that can break the grip of ghoulish death imposed upon us. On this point, I argue against Kristeva's notion of the abject. The corpse itself is not abject or horror-filled. It is not death infecting life. Rather, what is abject is the human who acts monstrous. The best example here comes from seasons 9 and 10 of The Walking Dead, where we are introduced to a group called the Whisperers. This cult disguises themselves by dressing in zombie skins. They view themselves as animals and live under a pack with Alpha as their leader. Their tactic is to camouflage themselves within the zombie herd in order to attack humans. The parallels with Aesop's fable of the wolf in sheep's clothing is telling. The Whisperers are deceptive. They look like the undead in order to harm the living. They have taken the side of murder. In other words, the monster is not the creature that Dr. Frankenstein created. The monster is Dr. Frankenstein himself. The zombie is a study of what human beings have done to each other and the planet they inhabit. If the zombie remains relentless, it is because the horror of our world is relentless. Here I am not interested in the zombie's place within the popular culture of films, comic books, and video games, but in its place within everyday life. What do zombies and ghouls tell us about our species? The evidence is clear. We are the most lethal, mindless, desire, and appetite-driven species of the planet that loves to devour its own in so many different ways. Little wonder that most of our religious systems have alerted us to the presence of evil in our midst and what can be done to overcome its vicious effects. This is why Romero's film, Night of the Living Dead, stands as a realistic vision of the monsters that walk as human beings. In 2008, Romero tells us that his zombie films have been about the humans. The stories are about how people fail to respond in the proper way. As the course progresses, we shall see what a proper ethical response to these issues consists of. Again, it's not zombies who dehumanize us. Rather, it is humans acting as ghouls who dehumanize their kind. These human monsters consistently find themselves in positions of power. They take the form of totalitarian leaders who create hellish kingdoms on earth. The zombie genre has changed to reflect the world we live in, but what has proved constant is the overwhelming monstrosity of certain human beings who have taken delight in destroying us. A decaying corpse is fearful and pitiful at the same time. I have seen hundreds of such corpses. What is more terrifying are the human beings who have reduced others to corpses in the blink of an eye. So we need not turn to zombie films to see a world where cruelty, murder, and depravity exist. Those things are everyday happenings that keep multiplying. Is there a way forward past the ghoulish world where the sacred sense of personhood can be restored? I hope that there is. Otherwise, the words of Dante's Inferno, "Abandon all hope, you who enter," would be a birthday greeting rather than a literary interpretation. This is why philosophy, as I understand it, is so important, because it teaches us to cut through lies in search of truth. Philosophy shows us how a better world might be possible beyond the current political systems that debase and degrade our humanity.